You know that feeling? It's a completely universal experience.
Oh yeah, everybody knows it.
Right, you're trapped in a rut, you're paralyzed by this heavy, just suffocating lack of motivation.
And you're just watching your goals, like your dreams, slowly slip away.
Exactly, because that comfort zone you're sitting in, that warm bed on a freezing morning, or that familiar routine that demands absolutely nothing from you, it's just too hard to leave.
It's a really painful, stagnant place to be.
It is. But what if there was a secret weapon to completely obliterate that problem? Like a mental framework forged not in some sterile psychology lab, but in the fires of unimaginable human suffering.
And, well, it's a framework that demands a heavy toll. We're talking about a complete, tear down to the studs rewiring of how you perceive pain, comfort, and even your own identity.
Welcome to Book and Podcast, the Library of Success. Today, we are going on a deep dive into the life and the mind of David Goggins.
Specifically through the lens of his book, Can't Hurt Me.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to extract the raw, tactical algorithms that Goggins used to transform himself. I mean, we are looking at a man who was once a severely depressed 300-pound exterminator reading at a third-grade level.
Yeah, and he rebuilt himself from scratch into what he often calls the hardest man God ever created.
So we need to set the parameters for this conversation right out of the gate.
We really do, because look, if you are tuning in right now expecting a feel-good, warm and fuzzy motivational seminar, you're honestly in the wrong place.
Yeah, motivation is just a feeling.
Exactly. And feelings are fleeting. They vanish the second your alarm goes off at 4 a.m. What we're exploring today is something permanent.
It's about deliberately using friction and physical pain to actually alter the physical structure of your brain.
Uncovering that 60% of potential that, well, the vast majority of us just leave entirely untapped.
Right, so to understand how a human being actually rebuilds their mind, we have to establish the starting line. When we talk about being dealt a bad hand in life, we usually mean, strict parents or a tough financial situation.
Right, but Goggins' baseline was, it was a nightmare.
It really was.
It was a continuous waking nightmare. He spent his early childhood in Williamsville, New York in the early 1980s. And if you look at his family from the outside, they were the picture of the American dream.
Chic house, luxury car.
A beautiful house on Paradise Road, cars in the driveway.
Yeah.
But the reality inside that house was a completely different universe. His father, Toughness Goggins, owned a roller skating rink called Skateland.
Which was highly profitable, right?
It was, but it also served as a front for a prostitution ring.
Unbelievable.
And Toughness ruled his business and his family with just absolute terrifying violence.
The details from the source material genuinely give you pause. Like, as a 6-year-old child, David was working until midnight at this roller rink.
Just exhausted.
Scrubbing bathrooms, managing heavy skates. And if he made a mistake, his father would beat him mercilessly. And he's also witnessing his mother endure horrific physical abuse.
There's that one specific scene in the book.
Oh, where he's trying to sleep on the couch.
Yes. Little David is trying to sleep on a couch in the rink's office, and he reaches under the cushion and realizes he's resting on a loaded gun.
Just think about the sheer terror of that for a second. A child internalizing that level of constant danger.
Right. And when a child is subjected to that kind of unpredictable violence, they develop a state of toxic stress.
Which physically changes the brain.
Exactly. The human brain isn't designed to live in a perpetual state of emergency. When it's flooded with cortisol and adrenaline day after day, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for complex learning and memory, essentially shuts down to prioritize basic survival.
Wow.
So when his mother finally orchestrates this desperate escape and they flee to Brazil, Indiana, they are completely destitute.
Surviving on what, $123 a month in welfare?
Yeah, exactly. But the physiological and psychological damage was already deeply ingrained.
And the physical manifestation of that trauma is just startling. I mean, he developed a severe stutter. His hair was literally falling out in patches from the stress.
Yeah, as a kid.
By the time he's sitting in a third-grade classroom, he's practically unteachable because his brain was still trapped in fight or flight mode. He wasn't absorbing information, he was just scanning the room for threats.
He survived the school system by becoming a master of cheating. Just copying answers to remain invisible.
Right. And then fast forward to his 20s, and the delayed bill for all of that unprocessed trauma comes due. He balloons up to nearly 300 pounds.
Working a dead-end job.
Yes, spraying for cockroaches at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he is entirely consumed by a victim mentality.
But the turning point happens precisely in that abyss.
He comes home from a shift, right?
Yeah, he comes home from spraying cockroaches, absolutely exhausted, disgusted with his life. And he happens to catch a television documentary on Navy SEAL training.
Specifically BUD.
Right, the basic underwater demolition training. He's watching these men endure freezing surf, carrying heavy boats on their heads, pushing through unimaginable physical exhaustion.
And staring at that screen, this profound, chilling realization washes over him. No one is coming to save him.
There is no rescue boat.
That exact moment gives birth to one of the most vital tactical tools in this entire deep dive, the accountability mirror.
Such a powerful concept.
Goggins realizes his entire life is built on a foundation of lies he tells himself just to feel better. So he shaves his head, stands bare in front of his bathroom mirror, and starts placing Post-it notes on the glass.
And on these notes, he writes the brutal, unfiltered truth about who he is in that exact moment.
Like what?
He wrote statements like, "You are fat, you read at a third grade level, you are a joke." He completely stripped away the comforting illusions.
Now, I struggle with this concept a bit. Let's unpack this. Writing "you are fat" or "you are dumb" on a mirror and staring at it every day. Everything we know about modern psychology suggests that kind of negative self-talk is destructive.
It sounds counterintuitive, yeah.
It sounds like a fast track to severe depression, not success. Like, how is that not just toxic self-hatred?
It's a really critical distinction to make. What we usually categorize as negative self-talk is rumination. It's a passive, looping narrative that just makes you feel helpless.
Right.
Goggins wasn't ruminating. He was performing an objective audit. It wasn't self-hatred, it was ego death.
Ego death.
Yeah, because our egos are defense mechanisms designed to soften reality. We tell ourselves, oh, I just need to lose a little weight, or the school system just failed me.
Right, making excuses.
That softness creates this amorphous, heavy cloud of failure. And you can't fight a cloud.
Wow, that's a great way to put it.
By using the accountability mirror, he forced himself to identify the harsh truth without the fluff. He transformed a vague feeling of inadequacy into a hard, measurable data point.
And once you have a tangible target, you can formulate an attack plan. So the honesty isn't to punish himself, it's to locate the enemy. That radically shifts the perspective. And his attack plan involves setting an almost comical, impossible task. He decides he's going to become a Navy SEAL.
Which is insane given his starting point.
Right. There are massive barriers. He is over 100 pounds over the weight limit, and he has less than 3 months to drop it just to qualify for a training slot.
Not to mention the academic side.
Right. He has to pass the ASVAB, the military's rigorous entrance exam, which he had already failed twice because, again, he's operating at a third-grade reading level.
And his approach to passing that exam perfectly illustrates this new mindset. He couldn't just sit down and read a textbook. His brain literally could not process and retain the information that way.
So what did he do?
He bought stacks of spiral notebooks and physically wrote out the textbooks, word by word, page by page.
You mean he just copied the whole book?
He would sit at his kitchen table for 6 hours a day copying the text.
He is essentially brute forcing neuroplasticity. He's forcing his brain to slow down, process every single syllable, and build new neural pathways through sheer, agonizing repetition.
Precisely. It's mechanical, frictionless learning replaced by high-friction labor.
And against all odds, it works. He loses the weight over 100 pounds in under 3 months, and he passes the ASVAB. He earns his ticket to BEDS.
But getting there is just the invitation to the actual crucible.
Right. Hell Week.
Yeah. To become a SEAL, a candidate must survive Hell Week. That is 130 hours of continuous physical training, freezing cold ocean water, and severe sleep deprivation.
And most candidates who fail quit during this week.
Exactly. And because of a series of severe injuries, Goggins doesn't just go through Hell Week once. He is rolled back and forced to endure it 3 separate times in a single year.
The physiological breakdown he describes during this period is, well, it's difficult to even process. During his 3rd attempt, he develops severe stress fractures in his shins.
Yeah, the bones in his legs are literally microfracturing under the load.
Every single step feels like walking on glass. And to hide the injury so he isn't dropped from the program, he wakes up early, sneaks into his room, and tightly wraps his lower legs and feet in duct tape.
Industrial tape.
He's using industrial tape to literally hold his bones together, and then he runs miles on the beach in heavy boots. Which
forces us to ask the physiological question.
Yeah.
How is a human body capable of that?
Yeah, how?
And this introduces the foundational concept of Goggins' philosophy, the 40% rule. He realizes through this suffering that the human body operates very much like a vehicle equipped with a factory-installed governor.
Like a speed limiter.
Right, a mechanism designed to limit speed and output to prevent the engine from destroying itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the ultimate low battery warning. Think about your smartphone.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
When it hits 1%, the screen dims, your background apps shut down, and you panic thinking the phone is dead. But somehow it manages to stay alive for another 45 minutes if you really need it to.
Because it's trying to save itself.
Exactly. Your brain is doing the exact same thing. It throws up that critical warning, the burning lungs, the shaking muscles, the overwhelming desire to quit way too early. It's terrified of hitting absolute zero, so it lies to you about how much juice is left.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. When your mind insists you are completely exhausted and cannot take another step, you are generally only at 40% of your true physical capacity.
Wow, 40%.
That initial blast of pain and fatigue is not a physical limit. It is a psychological boundary. Your brain is wired for ancient survival, which means conserving calories and avoiding damage.
Right.
But if you can hold your ground against that initial fight-or-flight panic, if you accept the pain instead of resisting it, you trigger a physiological override.
You tap into the sympathetic nervous system.
Exactly. The brain realizes you aren't going to stop, so it shifts its hormonal strategy, flooding your system with adrenaline and unlocking access to that hidden 60% reservoir.
But understanding the 40% rule in theory is one thing. How do you tactically access it when you are in the deepest, darkest trenches of suffering? Like, let's look at the San Diego one-day race.
Oh, the 100-mile ultramarathon.
Right. Goggins enters this race with zero specialized training. He had been heavily powerlifting and hadn't run more than a single mile in 6 months.
Just incredible.
He enters purely to raise money for the families of SEAL teammates who were killed in action.
And without the necessary physiological adaptation, the calloused feet, the conditioned joints, his body predictably, catastrophically fails.
By mile 70, he is in a dire medical state. He has new stress fractures in his feet. He is peeing blood, indicating acute kidney failure.
And he's sitting in a folding chair in a bathtub at a makeshift rest stop, shaking violently, entirely unable to stand up under his own power.
He is at the absolute bottom. The physical machinery is broken, yet he manages to stand up and he finishes 101 miles.
It's unbelievable.
How does a person do that? This brings us to a mental tactic called the cookie jar.
Right. The cookie jar is a psychological vault. When the pain reaches a crescendo and your brain is screaming at you to quit, you reach into this mental jar and retrieve memories of your past micro-victories.
So, sitting in that bathtub, he wasn't thinking about the 30 miles he still had left?
No, he reached into the jar. He remembered losing those first 5 pounds when he was over 300 pounds. He remembered surviving his father's violence. He remembered the grueling hours copying textbooks to pass the ASV.
He's using his own history as evidence against his current desire to quit. If you apply this to the listener's life, when you're staring at a blank screen at 11 p.m. trying to finish a massive project, and your brain tells you it's impossible and you should just go to sleep.
That is your mile 70.
Exactly. That is when you have to open the jar. You remind yourself of the difficult exams you passed, the tough interviews you survived. You hack your own quitting mechanism by reminding yourself of who you have already proven to be.
Precisely. But there's another tactical tool he employs, specifically designed for external pressure and adversity. Taking souls.
Taking souls sounds intense.
It is. This is a strategy of gaining a psychological advantage by overperforming precisely when your opponent expects you to break.
Like during BUDS.
Yeah, during BUDS, the instructors would often single him out. They wanted to break him. They'd force him to do endless flutter kicks and push-ups in the freezing surf while the rest of the class watched.
And instead of grimacing, breaking eye contact, or showing pain, what does Goggins do?
He smiles.
He smiles.
He would look the instructors dead in the eyes and show genuine enthusiasm. He took their soul by weaponizing his joy in the face of their punishment.
It's a brilliant psychological counterattack. It's like a mental game of chess. But let's map this to the real world. Most people listening to this deep dive are not competing against an evil Navy SEAL instructor on a beach.
Right.
So if you're sitting at a desk job, who are you taking souls from?
Ultimately, the primary opponent is always your own mind. But you can absolutely use external forces like a toxic corporate environment, an unfair boss, a doubting professor as your fuel.
So you don't fight them directly?
No, you don't take their soul by arguing with them or writing an angry email. You fight them by becoming so undeniably excellent that their negativity loses all its power. You outwork their malice.
If a boss expects you to fail on a presentation, you over-deliver to such a staggering degree that you force them to respect your output.
Exactly. You take back your autonomy by proving their judgment irrelevant.
Use their doubt as combustible fuel. I like that. So Goggins achieves the impossible. He becomes a Navy SEAL.
Which is huge.
For 99.9% of humanity, that is the end of the movie. You frame the trident, put it on your wall, and you coast on that achievement for the rest of your life.
But Goggins looks around and realizes that even within the elite Tier 1 military units, operators were finding ways to get comfortable.
Which forces him into his next evolution, the pursuit of becoming uncommon amongst the uncommon.
He recognizes that massive success is actually the most dangerous trap a person can fall into.
Because success breeds comfort.
Exactly. To combat this, he enrolls in Army Ranger School, graduating as the enlisted honor man, the top of his class. And then he volunteers for Delta Force selection, the absolute pinnacle of military special operations.
And the Delta Force selection involves this grueling, multi-day land navigation course through treacherous mountains, carrying an incredibly heavy rucksack.
Candidates are dropping out left and right from sheer exhaustion.
And Goggins is practically running up these severe inclines. But here's the detail that completely recontextualizes everything we've talked about today. Sometime after this, he goes in for a routine medical checkup, and doctors discover an atrial septal defect.
A literal hole in his heart.
Hold on, a literal hole in his heart.
Yes, specifically a congenital defect between the two upper chambers of the heart. What this means physiologically is that oxygen-rich blood mixes with oxygen-poor blood.
So his heart was operating at a fraction of its intended capacity.
Exactly. When you are running 100 miles or carrying a heavy pack up a mountain, your muscles are screaming for oxygen. He accomplished 3 Hell Weeks, Ranger School, and ultramarathons while his muscles were essentially starving for air.
It defies medical logic. So he has open heart surgery twice. Does he finally rest and enjoy his life? Obviously not.
Of course not.
He decides he wants to break the Guinness World Record for the most pull-ups completed in 24 hours. He secures a spot on national television on the Today Show to attempt it live. And he fails, completely and spectacularly.
It was rough. His muscles lock up, his grip fails, and he falls hundreds of pull-ups short of the record while millions of people watch.
For a normal person, that level of public humiliation would be devastating. You'd retreat and never talk about pull-ups again.
But Goggins treats his life like a military campaign. He sits down and conducts an objective after-action report.
He strips away the shame, the embarrassment, the emotion of failing on TV, and he just looks at the raw data.
Right. He analyzes the friction of the specific pull-up bar he used, his hydration strategy, the way his hands were taped.
He turns a devastating failure into a science experiment. He adjusts the variables, and a few months later, far away from the television cameras, inside a dingy, quiet gym in Nashville, he obliterates the record.
He completes 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours.
Which perfectly encapsulates a massive overarching philosophy from the book,
Right.
starting at 0.
Right, the concept that the refrigerators never full.
You achieve a monumental goal, you allow yourself a brief moment to acknowledge it, you put the medal in a drawer, and you wake up the next morning as a complete beginner with nothing to your name.
Yes.
I have to challenge this, though. If you literally never stop to enjoy the view from the summit, aren't you just running on a very painful, endless treadmill? Is this actually a healthy psychological state, or are we just glorifying a man who has become addicted to the friction of his own trauma?
It's a really necessary and fair critique, but we have to look at the philosophical anchor beneath it. The goal, in his framework, isn't the finish line. The goal is the continuous evolution of the self.
Okay, I see.
Life is an incredibly dynamic, unforgiving game. You are either actively getting better or you're passively getting worse. There's no such thing as maintaining the status quo. Time degrades everything.
So you have to keep pushing.
Goggins realized that the friction of the pursuit, the struggle itself, is the only thing that keeps the mind calloused and sharp. The moment you stop seeking that friction, your mind softens, your ego returns, and that 40% governor takes control of your life again.
It's the difference between achieving a single goal and adopting a lifelong posture of relentless forward motion. The friction isn't the punishment. The friction is the protective armor.
Beautifully said.
As we synthesize all of these sources today, there is one final, incredibly elegant tool that Goggins uses to silence external haters, doubters, and most importantly, his own internal fear. It is a simple 2-word question. What if?
When the world looks at you and tells you that your goal is statistically impossible, or when your own mind whispers that you were too damaged or you started too late or you're too far behind the curve, you simply pause and ask, what if I actually pull it off?
What if? It instantly short-circuits the brain's panic response and shifts it into a state of possibility.
It absolutely does.
It gives you permission to envision the most outrageous, audacious achievement and then formulate a plan to go after it. So here is our specific call to action for you, the listener, right now.
Grab a physical journal today.
Yes, do not type this into the Notes app on your phone. Physically write it down. Write out the absolute worst excuses, the deepest insecurities, and the bad hands you feel you've been dealt in your life.
And put those notes on your own accountability mirror. Look at them not with shame and not with pity, but with radical, cold honesty. Treat them as data points.
And then tomorrow morning, find a way to take one step, just one intentional step, past that 40% barrier your mind has artificially constructed for you.
Throw off the covers. Get out of that warm bed.
Step completely out of the rut, because the comfort zone is an invisible trap, and the only way to break out of it is to lean directly into the friction.
Thank you for listening to Book and Podcast. We will see you on the next deep dive.